All right, so here we go. So first of all, thank you for everyone that is here today. I very, very much appreciate it. I think we have 40 participants so far. So I very much appreciate you. You have lots of choices of sessions to go to, so I appreciate your commitment and support, and also everything that you do to meet the needs of your multilingual students. So thank you for being here. It is much appreciated. Um, just trying to think, do I have any household items? I think we're good. Like I said, I am going to try to get you out about 10 minutes before the hour, just so that you have some transition time before the keynote. But otherwise, I think that's about it. And I do have the link that I'll drop in the chat at the end so that you don't have to go searching. You can just click right from the chat and be able to do that. All right. So welcome to Instructional Coaching for Teachers and Multilingual Learners. First, I'll introduce myself, if that's okay. I joke that this is my favorite slide of the whole presentation because it is. These are all of my people. I am the proud mom of 4. Again, my name is Ashlee Miller. These are my babies. They are 10, 8, 6, and 2, and things are wild and crazy all of the time. I'm just going to see. Can you everyone just check your mute, please, if you wouldn't mind? Thank you so much. Okay. These are the people that make my world go around. Our youngest daughter is especially a little bit more bossy than the rest. She's definitely a baby girl, and she bosses her brothers around, and they live and breathe for her, so it's pretty cool. We also live in a somewhat bilingual household. My kids are exposed to lots of language, and so that's kind of cool and part of why I do the work that I do. Also, my husband, if I'd be remiss if I missed him, he's kind of the glue that holds everything together. On the bottom of the screen there, and he's also in school, but he does school business, so he's on a little bit of the other spectrum than I am. We are diehard all things Philadelphia fans, as you can see from our Eagles shirts and Flyers gear and all of that, and I hold that very, very dear to my heart. So if any of you want to talk about, the Eagles football coming up, I'm happy to have that conversation to stay on after. Moving on to kind of my work experience, just to give you an idea of who I am. So I started teaching about 15 years ago or so, and I actually started as in cyber school. So I started in Pennsylvania, where I'm located. We live in the Philadelphia area. Cyber charters are kind of a big thing. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I was fresh out of college, and I thought, well, I got this job offer and I could try this out and see what happens, or I can work at Starbucks and be a barista and not use any of it, right? So I was like, all right, let's give it a shot. And it actually was a very, I don't even know, it was very informative for me. And actually, I took all of those skills that I had learned, and when school went online in 2020, it was really helpful information and experience to kind of lean into. So I did that for about 5 years, and I taught English as a second language. That's the certification in PA. It's an ESL cert. So I taught and went all over the state supporting my students, all over the state of Pennsylvania supporting my students for about 5 years. After that, I moved over to Radnor Township School District in PA, where I was again a middle school multilingual learner teacher. And eventually I moved into the role of coordinating their ESL program K-12. So I did that for about another 5 years. I moved over to administration, did that for a couple, and then found myself at UD, where I'm at the School Success Center and really working to support multilingual learners and their educators statewide and nationally. And I really focus through a literacy lens because I think if we can get kids really reading well and being able to converse and have greater dialogue in the classroom, then we're halfway there. So that's kind of one of my main areas of focus. I also teach ESL certification courses through the Chester County Intermediate Unit in the IU, which is technically Newman University. And I'm in doctoral programming at UD. So I stay busy with all of the things, but this is definitely multilingual learners is kind of my passion, my heart. I've been working with multilingual families for the entirety of my career, and that's kind of what I bring to all of you today. In terms of just our norms for our time together today, this is a judgment-free space. We're going to be very forgiving, open to new ideas, and really just hearing what other people might have to say. This is hopefully, I'm going to kind of talk at you a little bit for a while, and then we're going to move through, and I'm going to offer you some opportunity to collaborate with each other. And so this is very kind of a collaborative space for that. So please, feel free to unmute even, ask questions, pause me if you can. I get really excited about this work. The more excited I get, the faster I talk. So if I am moving too quickly or something, just throw up a hand, shoot a message in the chat, whatever you need to do, so that I can kind of slow myself down and make sure you're getting all the information that you need. All right, here we go. In terms of our objectives for today, the very first thing I want to do for all of you is kind of establish the why around instructional coaching and why I truly believe, and I think the evidence is really pointing that we need to really start transitioning the role of our multilingual teachers into a more collaborative coaching space. And I'm going to give you lots and lots of research as to why I think that that's a really strong area to be in, and then offer you a level of support on how we can kind of move in that direction. We're also going to kind of think about a framework for instructional coaching and kind of its impact on, or potential impacts on multilingual ed, and also build an understanding of some effective coaching strategies. So I'm going to try to do both for you. I have a few things, a few kind of one-pagers that I'm going to share with you so that you can take that away as a resource. And then feel free to reach out if you ever have any questions or concerns. Before I forget, and you'll see my contact information at the end of this meeting, but I am going to also drop it into the chat for you all. So that's my email. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions or anything, post this conversation. Okay. So this is not new to any of you, but I wanted to make sure we set a basis. I'm sure you have all seen this. But according to the OELA, Office of English Language Acquisition, Delaware especially, has a huge amount of growth with our multilingual learners. We're at 400% and growing over the last 20 years or so. And this is not a number that we expect to go down anytime soon. You've heard this already throughout your sessions this week, or I guess yesterday and today. And they are the fastest growing student population, not just in Delaware, but also nationwide. And so it's really imperative that we look at our practices and decide what's working and what's not working, and then how we really make the educational experience for our multilingual students stronger. So that's one of our key goals as we're looking at what effective professional learning and coaching might look like. So, and again, I know you all know this, but I just wanted to make sure that we were starting from the same base. Our multilingual students represent lots of different personalities, experiences, abilities, interests. Some students are born in the United States and educated in the United States, but haven't quite yet mastered academic language in English. Some of them have varying literacy and language development in both L1 and L2. And some, we know we have a growing SLIFE population, right? So our students with limited or interrupted formal education. And so, and that kind of goes all the way to students that are very, well-schooled, have had lots of access, and are highly proficient in their L1. So we have kind of a really big mix of students that we are working with in Delaware daily. And by and large, historically, the U.S. has really focused on the preparation of language specialists, so all of us in this room, to teach bilingual, English immersion, sheltered, pull-out, push-in programs. And really, when the 2001 No Child Left Behind Act happened, that really shifted some greater attention to content teachers. And we know with the reauthorization of ESSA, that was a big deal related to it's everyone's responsibility to teach language in the classroom, which I always think is a little bit funny because aren't we all language learners in the classroom in a way? We're all learning a new level of vocabulary. We're all learning a new level of conversing, having academic dialogue and things like that. But it's really kind of put a big spotlight on what it means to teach academic language in the classroom. And so, that shifted greater kind of attention to content teachers with the stated goal of parity in monolingual English and multilingual students' achievement on standardized tests, specifically on content learning. And so they really wanted to see those two populations become more parallel and equal. And so, we do a lot of things to kids, I feel like, in terms of pulling out or pushing in. We do a lot of that sheltered instruction. I know a lot of you work in co-teaching classrooms and things like that. But there are still inequities among those populations, both if we think about cultural inequities or linguistic, economic, learning differences, things like that. And we find ourselves in a space where we really need to have greater amounts of professional learning for content teachers that are working with multilingual learners. Especially if we think about it this way, I think only in the last, 5 to 8 years or so that multilingual education has been a part of teaching certification programming. And so any teacher that would have graduated outside of those, the past 5 or 8 years might not have had that level of instruction in their pre-service, which is why, again, it's so important that they are having access to it now. So again, why instructional coaching? Why is this the way to go? This is a quote from Hirsch, who said, "Good teaching occurs when educators on teams are involved in a cycle in which they analyze data, determine student and adult learning goals based on that analysis, design joint lessons that use evidence-based strategies, have access to coaches for support in improving their classroom instruction, and then assess how their learning and teamwork affects student achievement." And so I think we could all read this together and nod and say, yeah, that makes sense, right? That we would teach this level of instruction, or we would teach this evidence-based or research-based strategy, and then we would follow up with the teachers, allowing additional support as they implement this new strategy in the classroom. The issue is, and often kind of that barrier is that time piece, right? When does this happen? How do we do it? And I think it's a little bit of a transition in how we've always taught multilingual learners, and then kind of what might be necessary to move through. The other thing I'm going to say about this too is when we're talking about instructional coaching, I'm definitely also including in our newcomer students in that where they're working with where they're working in the content and receiving access to grade level material. But with that said, I also believe in some level of newcomer programming that's really kind of responsive to the student needs as they come in. So really looking at their L1, L2, looking at language and literacy, and then really making some determinations on the skills they need. That should not be kind of a universal that any student that comes in year one is going to go into newcomer programming, but should be really based on each particular student. And so we would determine, the needs of the student or the intensity of the instruction they would receive based upon what they are able to do in both L1 and L2. And I know there's lots of things related to that, but that is not the point of this, so I'm not going to get on any soapboxes right now. But we can certainly have that conversation later. And, to kind of move forward, there's a lot of complex research that suggests learning opportunities are designed for content teachers, and they do make a difference. For example, coursework can change pre-service and in-service attitude and perceptions from a deficit mindset to more of those capacity orientations, which we've heard about a lot, right? We've heard about those asset orientations and that asset-based learning and instruction. And so some of that professional learning and coaching can really target that. There's also that, collaboration between language specialists and content teachers, which is very, very valuable. And you can kind of see the research pertaining to that as well. Many studies suggest content teachers benefit from collaborative learning with peers, coaches, PLC communities, professional learning communities, and also multilingual students saw benefit when teachers were able to highlight aspects of content language. So when I talk with teachers and I'm working with them now, I've even started to avoid words like modifications and adaptations of content. And I've started shifting over to the use of the word amplify. So how can I amplify this particular lesson? Or how can I amplify vocabulary so that the students are really working towards this mastery of academic vocabulary versus this more deficit mindset of needing to adapt or differentiate's a better word, but adapt or modify, based on the student's needs. How can we amplify based on the student's need and really highlight what the students need to be able to accomplish? And along with that too is that understanding that the word modification is really, when we say modification, what we really mean is that we're lowering the grade level expectation. And so that's really what the word modification in terms of content means, is that instead of really looking at a grade level appropriateness, we're really going to lower that expectation down a little bit. We're going to modify it, and we're no longer expecting maybe grade level attainment. And let me give you a quick example of that. And for any teachers that cringe at math, don't worry. I'm not a math person. I can't do it either, but this is the best illustration that I can really give you to kind of illustrate the point. But if we have a student, let's just call him Johnny, and Johnny is in a math class. And the teacher says, Johnny, listen, I'm going to teach about ratios today, but in my conversation or in my teaching about ratios, I know that you're really struggling with your mathematics fluency for multiplication. So instead of you participating in this ratio lesson today, what I want for you to do is I'm going to give you this worksheet and you're going to practice your multiplication fluency. Now, I think we could all agree that that is entirely well-intentioned, right? The teacher really just wants the student to build up that skill so that they can really increase their mathematics or their multiplication fluency so they're able to do the ratio lesson. But what we've really done is we've kind of modified that. We're expecting a lower grade level response from the student. And instead, what I would coach that teacher on is what tools can we offer the student so that they can access that ratio lesson and not fall behind on the grade level expectation, and then offer them opportunity for multiplication fluency, perhaps in tiered intervention or something like that. And so maybe I can give the student a calculator to be able to participate in the ratio lesson. And then we're going to have another lesson during intervention where they're really working on perfecting those multiplication skills. Everyone can just do me a favor and just double check that you are on mute, unless of course you have a question or a comment. That's very helpful. Thank you so much. Any questions about any of that piece before I move on?
I just had a quick question. How do we try to help our core teachers? I love how you presented that, to modify. It doesn't mean make it easier for them compared to the other students, but that key word that you really talked about, which is modify and lower the expectations, not necessarily the standards, but the expectations. How do you best help us when we are co-teaching or pushing into a class to better help the teacher understand that?
Absolutely. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more further into the presentation as well, but that's a really great question. I think that really helping the teachers to understand in all 4 language domains what the student can do, what is the student able to accomplish, and then really checking their expectation, especially on the grading side, because I feel like that's always the conversation is related to grading. If he's doing X and she's doing Y, how can I grade them on the same scale? But honestly, that is the definition of equity in grading, is we grade the students based on their attainment of the standard and not necessarily the presentation. And so we really want to think through, what is the student able to do linguistically on this assessment that I'm asking of them? How do I create an assessment or maybe adapt an assessment, amplify an assessment in a way that the students are able to let me know that they know the thing that I've been teaching, whatever that might be, because a scaffold is just that. Another way to illustrate it is, and I'm sorry for anyone that's ever taken any classes with me. I saw some familiar faces in here, but you're going to hear a repeat of a illustration. But I think it really illustrates it nicely, is this idea of we're standing at the bottom of the stairs with all of our students, right? We're standing at the bottom of the stairs and we want everyone to go from the first floor to the third floor. That's the goal, to get to the third floor. That is the purpose of my assessment. Some of the kids are going to be able to just walk up 2 flights of the stairs and they're going to be perfectly fine because they're able to do that. Some of my kids are going to need a ramp, and I'm going to put this ramp down and they're going to be able to go from the first to the third floor on my ramp. Another group of kids are going to need a wheelchair because that's what they need to get from the first to the third floor. They need a wheelchair. It's the same standard. I'm still assessing their ability to get from the first floor to the third floor. The difference with modification is if I say to another group of students, you're going to use the ramp, but you're going to stop at the first floor. We're all going to keep going, but you're going to stop at the first floor. That kind of illustrates that difference because now I've changed my intention of that assessment. I am no longer assessing the students on the same scale or the same accomplishment, regardless of the scaffolds that I've put into place. Now I'm assessing on something different. Does that help? Perfect.
Yes, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Okay. So, in terms of, other kind of things that, in terms of instructional coaching, so Richards really is indicating that coaching is the superior method of implementing change. And I think it's because of what we just experienced right there. Is a lot of it's that illustration method or the conversation that we're able to have. And this is much more effective than your kind of one and done short-term presentation or workshop where we do it to check off the list, like, yay, Title III accomplishment. Good, we did it. Now we're going to move on. But what we really want to think about, oh, and thank you for anyone who put UDL in. You're exactly right. What we really want to do is have a more structured long-term coaching relationship with our content teachers so that we are in their space helping and supporting them as needed. And like I said, we'll talk more about what that might look like as we move through the presentation. But I really loved this quote here where we talk about eliminating separate, fragmented, disjointed, or separated instruction for students learning English in favor of collaboratively planned and delivered classes, which can improve the multilingual learner's social, emotional, linguistic, and academic development. Thus, meaningful teacher collaboration, sharing successful instructional strategies, examining student data, reflecting on effective teaching practice, is the key to success. I think we all know teachers that we work with daily that have said the words, I can't teach the student. I don't know what to do. I don't have the tools. I don't know how to do this. And it really is kind of our responsibility to really boost that teacher self-efficacy regarding teaching MLs. We know data tells us that that is consistently low, but when we provide that professional learning, that targeted learning that focuses on that teacher skill acquisition through coaching, we do see that link to improve student learning. And it's really about selecting those evidence-based and research-based priority instructional strategies. And we know that when they're implemented well across every subject area daily, they make a difference for our students. And I'm actually going to skip really briefly a couple slides and I'll go back, don't worry. But this is kind of what I want to think about. So if we work with our content teachers, and this is a book from, actually, I can show it to you. It's Coaching for Multilingual Student Success. It's Karen Johansson Brock. It actually just came out. It's a 2024 publication. But basically, one of her main points is if we can, she talks about what we could call the critical four, so vocabulary, reading, dialogue, and writing, and talks about if we're able to work with content teachers to amplify the critical four, and we can get them 10 to 12 more vocabulary words daily, 4 to 6, more subject matter subject matter passages, so working on fluency and comprehension skills. We can give them a little bit more subject matter for creating dialogue and really promoting dialogue. And then, 4 to 6 more opportunities, because if you think about, if they have one opportunity in all content areas for academic writing, we multiply that by 180 days in the school day, give or take, right? This is that potential impact. And yes, I will show the book again, just one second. So this is that potential impact of the number of academic words or passages read or opportunities for academic dialogue or academic writing that students can achieve if we are able to create greater capacity in our school spaces. Here's that book one more time for anyone who needs it. Oh, thank you, Tessa. I appreciate that. All right, I'm going to switch in 3, 2, 1. So anyone that gets motion sickness, I would close your eyes and look away because I'm going to go backwards really quickly for a moment. I'm so sorry. Okay. So the strategies are really impactful when they're utilized as designed, right? So if we have our instructional or our evidence-based, research-based instructional strategies for multilinguals, which I'm going to talk about in just one second, where to find that information. If we utilize them daily, if we have students practicing academic discourse, if we have it be content focused, we don't need to do something else. All right. I think that's a lot of the temptation is we need something else. Now, again, my caveat is with brand new newcomer learners, brand new, who have not yet been exposed to the English language. This might look a little bit different. It might look a little bit different, but again, we want to make that determination based on the specific skills that each of those students are able to demonstrate, right? It should be student-based. But again, that is a different kind of category in space, or potentially. So content focus, we want to utilize it in every single one of the classrooms. We really want to build it into tier 1 lessons, okay? We know that English language development and English language instruction is not a tiered intervention, right? Not a tiered intervention. There's nothing bad about being multilingual. And we are going to embed it, however, in all support areas. So just because language instruction is not a tiered intervention doesn't mean that it should not be embedded in all support and intervention programs and areas. Make sense? It's going to be in both because the student doesn't stop being bilingual just because they're in MTSS programming and structures, right? And so in terms of where to find some of these research-based or evidence-based kind of best practices or instructional strategies. So the number one place that I look is first and foremost the What Works Clearinghouse. I'm going to drop this practice guide. This is just one specific practice guide that I just dropped into the chat for you all. And it gives you some really strong evidence for what works well with students, multilingual students. So that's one place that I get a lot of my information. This one here where it says academic content and literacy is just one. There are a few different practice guides. That's just the only one that I included in this particular set. I also am a huge fan of the Reading League, which I didn't include the link for, but if you Google the Reading League, it will pop up. And they have recently, last year, and again, it's coming up, I think August or April 24th, they came out with a joint statement about English learners and emergent bilinguals and the science of reading and kind of what that overlap looks like. So I'd highly, highly recommend their website. And there's lots more too that I can share with you in terms of where to find kind of more research-based best practices and things. And then when you look at this set of slides at the end, if you pull it up on the site, if you look at my reference pages, you'll see a lot of information there too, because I've referenced everything on my last couple slides of this presentation. So I wanted to have a common understanding of what is instructional coaching. So this is from the Children's Learning Institute, which established kind of this body of research and implementation expertise in the development and investigation of coaching-based professional learning models, specifically for early childhood, but we can see how this definitely can kind of be, look as a more K-12 approach. Oh, thank you so much, Orabelle. You're my right-hand gal today. I appreciate that. She put the link for the Reading League in the chat for anyone who wants it. There are seven categories kind of competency, from adult learning theory and really understanding who our adult learners are, to characteristics of effective specialists. There's observation, information on providing feedback, and so on. And this is just a set of kind of competencies that can be demonstrated during one-on-one conversations, a coach with a teacher. And then we can kind of view it as well in the classroom as teachers and their interaction with students or co-teaching, things like that. And so I just wanted to provide this kind of structure for what instructional coaching could potentially look like. And it just gives a little bit more of a foundational framework that benefits really all students. I mean, this is intentional for multilingual students, but it's really good for all students across the entire student population. I also included this. This is just a framework for improving areas of achievement in the content area. This is an article that gives a little bit more research kind of driven language for especially in grades 6 to 12, which I think is always, area of difficulty. I added that link as well into the chat so that you can grab that and view that article should you want to see a little bit more holistic to grades 6 through 12. Okay, we already talked about that. So also in this text, Karen talks about 5 different aspects of effective professional learning. And I wanted to briefly highlight each of these 5 pieces. And I'm watching time. It's moving much faster than I would like. But it's the first standard is really about evidence-based instructional strategies. And the whole idea of all 5 of these, honestly, is to really erase the gap between multilingual student learning and the learning of their age peers. And it's really imperative to implement professional learning structures holistically that include coaching as part of a professional learning plan. The instructional coach that is supporting the teacher really wants to transfer their learning in the classroom by providing a guided practice of skills. And really the instructional coach or the ML teacher in this case is really a colleague who is going to explore alongside the teacher, really speeding up the learning process for the teachers, but ultimately the students, right? And we know that when in terms of evidence-based strategies, those are those instructional practices that are going to accelerate learning for multilingual learners. We're going to look at the second aspect, which is learning design, reflection, data collection, and then leadership involvement. In terms of evidence-based strategies, like I said, you really want to work with teachers on guiding them through targeted pedagogical practice. And so all of this should be grounded in student data to look at the data and determine what is the area of need. Yes, you will. Yes. What is the area of need? And how can we look in all of these different locations? And these are just a few of my favorite areas to look. How can I look in these areas to really pull out that evidence-based and research-based practices that are going to support this particular identified area of need for our multilingual learners? And then really helping the teacher to go through that process of finding the information and implementing it in their classroom space. The only thing I will say, Culinary Colorado is obviously really, really great resource, but do just have a discerning eye because not all of it is research-based. Some of it is more promising practices versus that true research and evidence-based. So just have a discerning eye as you're kind of looking in that one particular. Again, it's great. I use it all the time, especially that new toolbox, the strategies toolbox. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but if you haven't, go check it out. It's pretty cool. But like I said, just have a discerning eye. And in terms of kind of learning design, professional learning plans that omit instructional coaching are actually only implemented in classrooms 5% of the time. So let me just say this again. The one and done kind of professional learning experiences that don't include consistent professional learning or professional or blah, 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 instructional coaching are only implemented in classrooms. We only see that transfer of knowledge and information 5% of the time. And when adding instructional coaching, implementation of those improved teaching practices reached nearly 100%. We're at 95% when professional learning training is school-wide and they have access to a coach that's going to support their understanding. There were California researchers actually in the early 1980s that conducted a 5-year study of teacher to skill development, and they looked at 80 different schools and noticed something really interesting. Workshops led teachers to use new skills in classrooms only 10% of the time. And even when a practice session with demonstrations and personal feedback was added, fewer than 20% made that change. But when coaching was introduced, when a colleague watched them try the new skills in the classroom, provided suggestions, those adoption rates really soared to almost 90%. And we definitely saw kind of that impact in that that percentage. And coach teachers were also more effective. Their students did better on the testing and so on. So here, when we talk about training component, it says study of theory, and that's really that what we talked about before, that evidence-based, that research-based, and really helping teachers to understand, here's the research, here's the information that we know, and then here's how it can transform into practice. And so again, really together, educators together, exploring those topics, learning the research on best practices and outcomes of implementation. Go ahead, Erica. What's your question?
Hi, so I actually just became a high school MLL coaching person. I was a classroom teacher, but now I'm in this position. So what does it look like if you're not the content like specialist, but you want to use best practice and research-based strategies? And I like the idea of like modeling with the teacher, but you're not like Algebra 1, I don't feel really competent. So like, what does that look like in the day-to-day where, yes, I want to come in and do sample lessons of best practice and strategies, but I don't know the content?
Absolutely. So in that area, what I really lean into, because I do not speak math. Like, I try to help my 4th grader on his math homework, and I can't. Apparently, I really, my maximum is 4th grade math. In my defense, they teach it differently, but I digress. So I think the number one suggestion I have in that case is to lean more into a co-teaching model, because pedagogically, we understand as language specialists what we need to amplify in a lesson. So when I do that co-planning prior to the implementation of that lesson, I'm really going to ask a lot of questions about what language-like things are we going to be asking of the students? Are we asking them to write to explain their answer? Are we asking them to speak and have discourse explaining their answer or participating in some way? Are we asking them, is it entirely a lecture format? What kind of resources are we bringing in? What kinds of things are we amplifying in that, that delivery aspect of the lesson itself that's really meeting the students' needs? Reading. Oh, and are we asking the students to read anything? Or what language-like things are we asking them to encounter that are written language? And really kind of thinking through that process and that co-planning atmosphere, I think, is where we hit a lot of that, especially at secondary, where I am clearly not the content expert. And I also use that a little bit to my advantage to say, listen, you are the content expert here. I do not speak math. Clearly, you'll see this soon. But what I can do is sit with you and tell you, this is what I know about language, and this is what I know about language acquisition, and here's how we can amplify this piece. Here's how we can really expand your teaching of right angles or whatever, and helping students understand that right doesn't always mean to the right or that you are correct, but also has this other definition when we talk about a 90-degree angle. And I hope it's 90. I'm pretty sure right angles are 90 degrees. But does that help clarify that a little bit?
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm definitely going to lean into more of that co-planning, co-teaching type of instructional coaching than just coming into the classroom in a math classroom where I can't do that and trying to like take over. Absolutely. That demonstration piece on the slide here too is about teachers seeing that target skill in practice where you do feel comfortable. Because like I said, even demonstration doesn't necessarily have to be in front of the teachers. Demonstration or in front of the students, demonstration can be within that co-planning piece. Like I am showing them, this is how I think about language as I'm planning a lesson. And also allowing teachers the opportunity to practice. Teachers need time during professional learning to really practice that new skill and content. Also, another area that might be helpful is if you're doing some of that role play, with that math teacher and saying, okay, teach me this concept, because trust me, it'll be easier to teach my students than it will be to teach me in math. So like, let's practice, let's role play that a little bit. Or even, like I said, that lesson collaboration is really important. And then after that session, it's important that teachers have the opportunity to practice in their setting, and also a responsibility of completing something, whether it's a reflection of how that went, or just a quick 2 sentences about this is what happened, this is what I saw based on my students. And then again, that coaching is intended to support teachers as they work to implement new instructional techniques in their classroom practice. So all teachers would work with a coach as a part of that professional learning plan, because without all of these things together, as you can see, the practice has little impact on actual student learning or participation of utilizing those skills in a classroom setting. And this kind of just gives another kind of view. It's called the additive function of instructional coaching. And basically, there's looking at student data, doing that collaborative professional learning, allowing practice, and also allowing time to reflect and refine is really, really important for our teachers. There's also there's also this idea of creating a menu of options that your teachers could take a look at to say, these are the things that I can do. And I have a couple of things for you. So this is actually out of the text that I showed you, the Coaching for Multilingual Student Success. This is just a sample coaching menu that looks at each piece. Like I can plan with you, and here are the things that I can do as we're planning together. And I can collect data. So while you're teaching, I can look at ways to improve student engagement. I can let you know that only 4 of my students, out of the 10 in the classroom, only 4 multilingual students were really participating. And what can we do to expand that engagement? So those types of things. I can work with
Ashlee,
you. Yes.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but you're on a roll. And it's wonderful. I want to know if we're going to have access to this one pager because it's fantastic.
Absolutely. Yes.
All right. Great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Oh, and please don't ever hesitate to interrupt me. I talk fast. I'm sorry. But in terms of implementation of research-based strategies or professional learning, here are all the things that I can do. I can work within collaborative teams. I think one big area that I would like to provide help and support for Delaware teachers are really around those co-taught classroom spaces, and really kind of perfecting some of that practice as well. And then also that professional learning development support. Can I just do some learning walks or ask as a whisper coach? Can I provide reflection prompts for you? Like, how can I help you in this space? And I also have that I'll share with you. This is a reproducible from the text. That is just a way for you to start really thinking about what coaching options or menu options that you would want to include in your practice. This is just blank of the one that I just showed you. So I can share this with you as well. And then note, even on the bottom here, it says coaches cannot give input on principal evaluations, report to a principal, unless someone is in imminent harm. Grade papers, make copies, make substitute plans, act as a substitute, or plan to organize for a teacher. So this is here basically because Karen Johansson Brock really wants to focus on protecting the role of the instructional coach and making sure that that teachers have ready access to that instructional coach all the time. But yeah, you will have access to both of these documents. In terms of reflection, this is kind of that one of the quotes from the text that I pulled out, but reflection really is playing a crucial role in teachers' learning as it allows educators to truly analyze and evaluate their teaching practice. They're making connections between theory and practice and identifying areas of growth and improvement. And really by building reflection opportunities into the process, practices can start to feel contrived and it just cannot, if teachers don't have the opportunity to kind of reflect on how are things going in my space, how are my students doing, how am I doing, what am I noticing, then it's just another hoop that they're jumping through, right? But we really want that reflective practice to be a part of those everyday activities for them. And again, I liked this last part where it says building periods of reflection into the day honors teachers' time and signifies the impact it has on teacher practice. When we talk about data collection, the goal, let's be real, the goal of all of this is improved student achievement, is our students being able to succeed and grow. And to ensure to know if our program is working, then we need to collect data. And so we can answer questions by reviewing student work, we can observe in the classroom, we can interview teachers, and with this data, we can decide, have we met the goal of student improvement? When the educational environment is really designed to teach students to learn more effectively, the student rate of learning is very much so accelerated. And when all staff members know the results of student achievement data, they're really becoming more a part of that process and they have a greater connection to it. And we can also use that data to really gather information on what evidence-based strategies and research-based strategies we need to implement holistically across the board. And that might be a part of, or that would be the driver of our professional learning plan. The text that I referenced also does have a lot of information about developing a professional learning plan in its entirety. So if that is something that you need at your district, I would highly recommend that particular text. In terms of leadership involvement, obviously, without leadership involvement, it is very, very difficult to move the ship forward. And so it is really important that school administrations attending sessions or communicating expectations, observing classrooms, because at the end of the day, if the building leadership is seen as knowledgeable and focused on improving classroom practice, it will happen. And if not, the adverse, right? And so it's also part of our role is to really work with our school administration to make sure that they have that foundational understanding of what it is that our multilingual students truly need in each particular context. And so again, just to, I guess, beat a dead horse, instructional coaching is really the most effective intervention, as you can see here, that designed for human performance. I am going to drop a link into the chat for this. This is where that quote comes from. This is a article in the New Yorker. Really interesting kind of article. He is actually a surgeon and is viewing professional coaching and instructional coaching in a particular way. So if you have a few minutes, it's a really kind of interesting read. But basically, the idea is an instructional coach is an experienced teacher who in most cases is released from the classroom to support the implementation of a professional learning plan through one-on-one classroom work with classroom teachers. The form of professional learning, this instructional coaching piece is embedded throughout the teaching day. It's providing timely and specific support for teachers, beginning with teacher conference, outlining a plan of and the role of both the teacher and the coach, and also kind of sharing common parameters and expectations for the coaching. Go ahead. Sorry.
Hi, thank you. So I'm wondering what resources exist for MLL coordinators or teachers to more fully embrace the role of coach. Like, are there classes that help us expand what our understanding of that is and how to help implement that role in our individual institutions?
Absolutely. That is actually one thing from my perspective that I'm really trying to push and support, both in my role at the School Success Center, and also within the Department of Education. Maria, are you still here?
I am.
Hi. Do you want to speak to any of that, or in terms of what it looks like for that evolving role?
Yeah, I mean, I am here kind of listening in and learning from Ashlee alongside all of you, but definitely an area that, you know, one, seeing the number of people here today, and we're starting to see more of these roles open up in our districts and charters across the state where we're moving in this direction. Certainly something that we are going to look into how we can provide more professional learning or coursework to help support that shift and helping people in this space in particular. So I don't know that and I'll look to see if there's anything that's sort of like outside of Delaware right now that we could pin into, but something that we will be looking to add to our professional learning offerings, certainly moving forward.
Yeah, and thank you. I'm so sorry to put you on the spot, Maria. I appreciate that.
Mhm.
But also, you know, like I said, from the School Success Center perspective as well, really, that's going to be my very first kind of one of my key areas of focus, is providing that level of learning, because like you, I never had any of that in my coursework. My ESL certification in PA was entirely linguistics and language based, and not that instructional component or that instructional coaching piece. I do hope to give you a little bit of that now in our short time together, just to give you like a taste, a toe in. But I will also say, this is a step aside, but my work in literacy development has actually improved my knowledge of instructional coaching, because it is a part of a reading specialist kind of repertoire. And so that's really been impactful for me in my own learning. So in terms of what coaching is and what it's not, so it is job embedded. We are bridging content with practice. We're focused on knowledge. It is kind of this peer novice to peer expert relationship. It's centered on the learner, and I think that is the most important thing. It's all about the student's reaction to the instruction, and not you did this or you did that kind of mindset. It is non-directive, non-evaluative, and the idea is that we are trying to empower the teacher. It is not a mentor relationship. I think that gives us a little bit more, when we think about a mentoring relationship, it's very much less, not a peer-to-peer relationship. It's definitely one having more power than the other. So it's not mentoring or a master-novice dynamic. We're not giving advice. We're not evaluating. And it is not teacher-centered based on this is what you did. It's based on what the students did as a result of the learning. I think it's really important to kind of think about being that kind of non-directive. And when I say that, what I mean by that as well is I ask a lot of questions in my coaching conversations. Something like, what would have happened if we would have allowed for a turn and talk here in this part of the lesson? What do you think the students' reactions would have been? Or really helping by asking questions to kind of direct the teachers to think about a particular area of the lesson delivery, versus saying, do this or do that. And I think it's also about creating dialogic spaces in coaching and teaching to generate the possibility of more shared values and perspectives, helping to really lead to new ways of thinking, being, acting, and all entirely in the pursuit of greater equity for students. In terms of coaching fundamentals, these are, you can see the source on the screen here, but you know, in many ways, language specialists are indirectly instructional coaches anyway. We're often asked to help modify or design assessment. That, at least that was my experience.
Hey, not at home. Stop with the screaming.
All right, there we go. Sorry about that, everybody. Okay. So Well, really teacher skill development is a key area of focus for instructional coaches. The goal for language specialists is equitable learning experiences. And I keep saying that word equitable, and we can kind of think about my illustration about the assessment piece, right? It's that idea of what scaffolds, what supports do I have to put into place, or can I put into place so that students are able to access texts or curriculum on the same level as their English speaking counterparts. Dr. Jim Knight is a leading instructional coaching expert, and he recommends 4 things for instructional coaches, which is what you see on the page in front of you. And these suggestions are really kind of transferable to our more collaborative work on behalf of language learners. And so our goal is to develop long-lasting, dynamic co-teaching, co-partnerships anchored in our ability to develop a positive, affirming relationship with our colleagues, and really working to share that learning experience, and recognizing that our teachers might have expertise that we don't have, like that content area expertise we talked about before. Or valuing each other's experience, such as teaching a highly demanding content and curriculum, especially if we think about students at the secondary needing greater access to higher courses, such as AP Lit and Comp. Our multilingual students, if they have that ability, should be an AP Lit and Comp. So what does that look like, and what experience does our teacher have to help, or what can we help them leverage to really make sure that the students have access there. Seeing the relationship again as more collaborative, and then building on trust through dialogue, not directives. 1 second. Yeah, so one of the questions in the chat just says that one of the pushbacks they're constantly getting is about students not being engaged or involved in the lesson, and then being pushed back onto the multilingual teacher saying, whatever you think is best, do that, or whatever you want to do, that's fine. And I think that the reason instructional coaching is so important, it's because it's really kind of saying, well, okay, like I hear what you're saying, and I know that your time is so valuable and you have a lot going on. Can we spend a few minutes co-planning this lesson together so that we can take a look at just the different aspects of your lesson, so that we can truly kind of amplify different spaces for the students and help them be able to participate in other ways? But those questions are always hard, and I always bring it back to, can we co-plan together? Can we meet together? Can we talk a little bit more about what this looks like in your space? But it's especially tricky in kind of those co-teaching environments. For sure. But if you want, the person message me directly, if you want to reach out to my email, feel free, and we can kind of talk about that a little bit more specifically in your context if you'd like. So in terms of the instructional coaching process, this is Jim Knight's text, The Impact Cycle. It really kind of lays out, again, a little bit of a framework for instructional coaching, just around identifying the goal, learning a particular strategy, and then improving with the use of that particular strategy. So those are kind of the 3 things. So working with a teacher, we're going to identify the goal. We're going to figure out, look at our student data, figure out what we really need to accomplish. Maybe we're going to accomplish increasing student discourse. Cool. Then we're going to learn a strategy. So one strategy for including student discourse is X. I'm just going to use one of the favorites because it's a favorite. We're going to use sentence frames to help increase student dialogue, right? And we're going to be really specific and include key vocabulary on these sentence frames so that students have practice in that dialogue, utilizing that key content vocabulary. And then he's going to implement that strategy, and I'm going to watch. And I'm going to pay close attention. Did that increase my multilingual students' participation in those collaborative or academic conversations? And we're going to have, in that planning session, we're also going to write down some look for. So how do I know my multilinguals are really collaborating or involved in that conversation? Well, they have their hands raised. They are I'm hearing them use that key vocabulary, or what are the things that I'm looking for that shows that level of improvement? And then we're going to meet afterwards to say, here are all the things I saw. It worked really well, or maybe it didn't, and here's what I'm going to try next time. Next time, instead of just the sentence frames, I'm also going to allow 2 or 3 minutes for everyone to write down one sentence that they're going to say in that collaborative academic conversation. So, and we're going to expand on it a little bit more, but it's all based on the student data. Someone asked the question in the chat in relation to the example you gave about AP classes. Many multilingual students are capable of the work in those classes in their native language. Yep, but can't fully express themselves in English. How do you bridge the gap? Can they submit assignments in their home language? So that's really tough, because if you put it into a translator to see if they are really understanding that particular assignment, then there's often some translation, right? Especially with academic language generally. Yeah, literally lost in translation. Yeah. But this is where we really have to get to the bottom of what is the purpose of the assessment. Is the purpose of the assessment that they need to demonstrate comprehension, or they need to demonstrate connections? What is the purpose? And then I think we can make some determinations about the use of L1 based on that. Because the other thing to consider as well is if those students are in an AP Lit and Comp class and they're exposed to a higher level of vocabulary, they likely perhaps were not exposed to that same vocabulary in their L1, because now they're being instructed here in L2, right? So we also want to think about that too. Do they have the appropriate academic language? So I think that I have a lot more questions, and I think this brings me to my point. We can't make these determinations on all students, right? It has to be very student specific and student driven. And so if a student, say, has been in China, perhaps, and they've only been in the United States for X amount of, like, a few weeks, and they're in an AP class because that's what they're able to accomplish, I might have a different answer on the use of L1. And perhaps in that case, I'm going to look for additional outside resources and supports. Perhaps I'm going to accept the translated copy because that meets the purpose of my assessment. I think it just really depends. Because if the purpose of that assessment is also English language and grammar and syntax, then we can't really utilize a L1 structure, right? So it all comes down to who is the student, what is the student able to do in L1 and L2, what has that previous experience been, and what is the purpose of this particular assessment each time. And that answer might be different depending on which assessment the student is being asked to complete. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it does get highly difficult in the secondary grades. It does, especially as their level of language and literacy skill increases, both L1 and L2, hopefully. And I think that we're going to start to see a lot more research coming out in that particular area, because right now it is a little bit thin in terms of research out there. But like I said, if you want to talk about that more, feel free to shoot me an email, and we can certainly discuss that at greater length. I also wanted to tie this a little bit because Delaware has really kind of moved towards the SIOP instructional coaching process. This is another text that really just looks at the same exact cycles of this text, just with a multilingual perspective. So really that pre-observation, planning conference, observation procedures, and then moving to that post-observation, but all very much embedded in the that same kind of instructional co-teaching cycle and process. Oh, perfect. So I don't know if you guys can see in the chat, but there is just a message about some greater research focusing on the exploration, the application of translanguaging for enhancing multilingual learners' academic achievements. If you wouldn't mind reaching out to me when you've got some kind of ground, I'd love to hear more about that. That would be really great. So kind of, I think I'm gonna have to start wrapping us up pretty soon. But I wanted to offer you this kind of thought on instructional coaching. So this is a book, Killian, from 2010. And basically the idea is looking at coaching light to coaching heavy. And coaching light is identified as focusing on teacher identified practices, some constructive feedback, but also this idea of self-assessing based on perceptions, opinions, focusing on implementation strategies, prioritizes feelings, which is great. Feelings are important, but also I really like to rely on data because data takes the feelings out of it, right? Because we can feel that students are doing really, really well, but then if we look at the data that shows that we're not, that paints a different picture. And so really to achieve instructional change, coaching needs to incorporate the latest research, evidence-based strategies, and data-driven decision-making, which is a little bit unlike coaching light, which is focusing on the impact of change of the teacher versus that student learning piece. And so what I really want to argue is that coaching heavy is where we want to aim. And I think we end up as language teachers and that coaching light because that's what we have available to us. It's quicker. It's, easier in a lot of ways to really kind of assist teachers in those quick adaptations and say, here, try these things. These things work well. But really looking on that coaching heavy, which is really utilizing data to inform our decision making for every student, and really helping teachers to understand who's in their classroom at any given time, what their strengths are, and then how they can leverage those strengths to amplify the curriculum to allow access. I already showed you this. Like I said, I will make sure that you have a copy of that. I'm going to kind of speed through just a little because I know we're running a little short on time. But here we have providing intensive, content-rich, and collegial learning opportunities for teachers can improve both teaching and student learning. When schools support teachers with well-designed and rich professional learning, those teachers are able to create the same types of rigorous and engaging opportunities for students, a foundation for student success in school and beyond. So from here, once we're like, okay, we have buy-in from administration, we know that instructional coaching is the way we really want to go. From here, what we would want to do in best practice land is to really develop a committee of people from across, populations in our school to develop a professional learning plan or have this be a part of an existing professional learning plan. But I want to spend a few minutes. So instead of talking about that and what it means for development, because many of you probably already have a learning plan in your districts, I want to talk for a few minutes about principles of adult learning. And I'm going to be honest, I only got about halfway through my slide deck. So when you all see it later, you'll see lots of information. And if you have any questions on any of it, feel free to reach out. But honestly, when we talk about adult learning principles, these are the 4 things that we know are most impactful. So they need immediate relevance. It has to be job embedded. It has to be something they can use today. They need active involvement. It has to be participatory. And I know sometimes we don't want to be participatory, but it really does have to. We need time to reflect. We talked about the importance of reflection and opportunity to really integrate this new information into what it is that we already know. And so I do want to talk for a moment about coaching conversations versus evaluation conversations. And we were going to do this as a group, but we just don't have time. So I'm going to show you the completed document. So coaching conversations are, like I said, collaborative. They focus on growth. We're not judging anybody. We know that teaching is the hardest profession there is, especially when you have a group of, mixed population group that has some learning needs and they have linguistic needs and they have whatever needs that they could possibly have. My son has behavioral needs. We also have allergies in the classroom that we're thinking about, right? There's lots and lots of things happening on. And so there's no judgment. It's all about really providing support, looking at the data, helping teachers to interpret that data, and then making decisions based on that, focusing on growth, focusing on what the teachers need, based on teachers' look-fors that you've established in that planning meeting. It should feel like a team effort and be teacher-centered in a way. But I'm going to go a little bit further than that and say teacher-centered, but student-centered first, right? What are the students doing? How are they reacting to that instruction? We don't want it to feel judgmental. We don't really want it to happen only a few times a year. We don't want it to be about the coach and what my feelings are, right? A lot of times I hear professional instructors talking about staying away from saying things like, I really loved this, or I really loved that, because it makes it a little bit more coach centered versus, did you notice how the students did X when you did Y? Those kinds of conversations. We don't want them to be anxiety inducing, although they usually are. And it certainly is not going to be tied to any level of teacher evaluation. I'm going to kind of go through because I wanted to show you one more thing to help guide some of these conversations. And this is where I'll kind of wrap us up for today. But like I said, when you get my slide deck, there'll be lots of other things there. My contact information is on the last slide. So do feel free to reach out and let me know if you have questions or need further explanation, anything like that. I am happy to help. But I do want to talk briefly about how to manage the task of instructional coaching. And so the first one is to start with some level of multilingual instructional guides. So I have a couple things for you. The first thing I have is this one that is created out of the Literacy Center Department of the School Success Center. And this is just basically, this is how we would help teachers to rate themselves in what it is that they're able to do in terms of multilingual learners. And then a rubric based on some recommendations from those IES guides and how we would see them embedded in classroom instruction. And so you'll see teach a set of academic vocabulary words. What does that look like? And then does the student or does the teacher think that they're able to do this well or not? And they can kind of evaluate themselves. And then you could also write things I noticed as you engaged in this learning move. And so this is one that I have for you. But the other one I wanted to show you, and I'm going to show it to you. And like I said, you will have access, but I think that we're doing a level of presentation on this at Policy and Practice Institute that's coming up in June, I think. So if you have interest, you can potentially see it there. But what we did is to help make some clarification for school leadership. We tied some of high leverage evidence to indicators from DTGSS. And so, like I said, we'll explain this more at Policy and Practice, and I'm sure it'll come up in any ESL meetings that you're, multilingual teacher meetings that are coming up. But basically, we tied it to each indicator, and each indicator defines different routines and procedures or behavior expectations that would be at each indicator. We created some examples. So if you're doing these things, here's what it might look like in the classroom. And this is the most important piece for you, these coaching connections. And so we listed out for each of those indicators, just areas to help coaches improve based on those high leverage evidence pieces. And so as you can see, this document is about 12 pages long just because each indicator is separated. But I'm going to make sure that you have access to this too, so that you can just have a little bit of framework around instructional coaching. And again, this is not a byway into coaches becoming evaluators. That is a strict policy for all instructional coaches is we are not evaluators. We do not report to administration unless someone is being harmed in the classroom. And, this is a very private and personal growth relationship that we're developing. But this does provide some framework around an existing tool. And so I will make sure that you have access to this as well. All right, so we have a few minutes before we move on. What questions might you have? So Olinda, I'm going to send all of my materials to Melissa, Carrie, and Maria, and then they will post it. I think that all of that should be posted in the Sketch site, I guess, is what's happening with all of that. I don't know. All I know is I'm supposed to email everything to Melissa. So, and I think it should be, I can't because it has to be reformatted as a PDF and then it'll be sent. I should have actually done a Padlet for this, but I didn't think of it until you just did this. Oh yeah, I don't know. I'm so sorry. Sorry. I mean, I could save the chat and send that out with all my stuff if that's helpful, but it might not be helpful. But everything you'll be able to see in the, and this is being recorded. So you'll also see, you'll be able to grab things in recording as well if you'd like. Any other questions that I can answer for you before we kind of part for the afternoon session?
Yes. Could you tell us a little bit more about the School Success Center and what they have available as offerings for ML teachers?
Yes. So I'm gonna let me grab that link and I'll send it to you. So basically the school, oh yes, and I'll put the link in that to the afternoon session, just 1 second. The School Success Center is a department of the College of Education and Human Development at University of Delaware. And basically what we do is we provide professional learning. So right now we have areas of literacy, math, it's I can't remember the title. It's specialized population, so special education, things like that. But also Dazzle, if you've heard of Dazzle, Dazzle comes out of the School Success Center as well for school leadership. And then my role is really been this year to investigate, evaluate kind of how things are going in the state of Delaware and nationally, developing things that teachers really need and in order to support the multilingual learners. We recently came out with, in partnership with the Department of Education, we put out a program evaluation tool. Like I said, I did that in partnership with the Department of Ed to really look at multilingual programming holistically and to help districts kind of evaluate their programming pieces. And so we're really looking to move forward to provide additional support. But like I said, at the beginning of the conversation, one of my key areas of focus is around providing levels of professional learning in terms of coaching conversations and really supporting kind of that transitional role of instructional, of multilingual learner teachers to that kind of more coaching space. And so that's a lot of what we're learning. Oh, look at you. We're both great. Thank you so much. You're awesome. And so that's a big, huge piece of our work. And then also, we're still developing and in terms of what resources that we're offering. And so just be on the lookout for that, or feel free to reach out if you have a specific need or specific request, and we can see how we might be able to arrange things and meet that. So do feel free to reach out. I also I teach some coursework for the Department of Ed. So I did literacy foundations for English learners this past spring, and we hope to offer that again coming up either the summer or the fall. So you might be seeing that coming as well. Oh, thank you. That's so nice. It was nice to see a lot of return faces. I saw a bunch. Let me see. Yeah, actually, Michelle, do me a favor and shoot me an email if you wouldn't mind. I do have some reproducibles from this text in particular that I can send off to you to help with that. And I just added my email address again. Thank you everyone for coming. I really appreciate it. Feel free to stay on if you have questions. But otherwise, I will see you in the main session. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Here you go. Oops, sorry, I dropped it and then some people wrote, hold on 1 second, I'll put it in again. There you go.